the vast, silent stillness of space, where stars shimmer like scattered diamonds and Earth seems like a distant dream, a woman sat alone in a damaged spacecraft, suspended between life and death. Her name was Lena Armstrong, an experienced astronaut from the United States, chosen for a mission that was meant to be the pinnacle of her career. But fate had other plans. Lena had trained for years. She was brilliant, fearless, and precise, a top-tier scientist. Along with 4 other astronauts, her mission was to collect data from a newly launched satellite orbiting beyond Earth's atmosphere. Everything went according to plan until it didn't. It happened suddenly. An unexpected technical malfunction. At first, it was just a flicker in the system. Then the lights went out, sirens wailed, and the control panel went dead. Panic set in. The ship began to spin uncontrollably. One by one, the systems started to fail. Her crewmates tried to regain control, but within minutes, tragedy struck. Lena survived. The others did not. Alone in a crippled spacecraft, Lena faced the cold silence of space, haunted by the faces of her fallen companions. Oxygen was limited. Communication systems were down. Food and water supplies would barely last a month. Hope seemed lost. But in that lifeless darkness, something unimaginable happened. One night, if such a term could even apply in a place where time didn't exist, Lena sat strapped into her seat. Her heart pounded, her eyes swollen from crying. She tried to close her eyes and calm the storm inside her. Then it came. A sound, soft at first, soothing, unlike anything she had ever heard before. No alarms, no mechanical hum, just a gentle voice, melodic and mysterious, echoing through the silence of space. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The words had no meaning to her, but the feeling they brought did. Lena opened her eyes and looked around uncertainly. Was she hallucinating? Dreaming? No radios were working. No systems were online. Yet the voice grew clearer. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. Calm, comforting, powerful. A strange peace settled in her chest. The fear that gripped her began to fade. She clenched her harness tightly and listened. Again and again the words repeated. They didn't feel foreign, they felt familiar, like a long-lost memory returning. Days passed. Time blurred. But the voice remained, drifting through the cosmos. Lena began to wonder. Was this the last comfort before the end? A trick of the mind? Or was someone, something, reaching out to her? A week later, a miracle occurred. A rescue signal finally reached her spacecraft. After relentless scanning, NASA's ground team located her. A rescue ship was immediately dispatched. Lena was brought back to Earth, physically alive but forever changed. And yet, the moment her feet touched solid ground again, she felt a void. That voice, those words, still echoed in her ears. And now, without the silence of space, the noise of the world felt deafening. She tried to return to her old life, to the old Lena. But something deep inside her had changed. She couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, couldn't forget the voice she had heard in space. It wasn't just a sound, it was a calling. Lena had to understand what it meant. Weeks later, she made an unexpected decision. She left the chaos of city life and flew to Indonesia. There, in the calm of Bali, far from reporters and scientific debates, she sought solitude. She told no one about the voice, not yet. She just wanted peace. Bali welcomed her with warm beaches, gentle breezes, and a sense of timelessness. But even here, the voice in her memory grew stronger. One morning, as she wandered a quiet street near her guest house, she heard it again. This time not in her mind, but from a nearby building. The sound floated in the air, soft, deep, unmistakably familiar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Lena froze. It was the same voice, the same melody, the same feeling. She turned toward the sound and found herself standing in front of a small mosque. The call to prayer, the Adhan, echoed from the loudspeakers. Her heart pounded. She stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force. At that moment, the mosque door opened. Out stepped a man in a neat police uniform, drying his hands with a small towel. He noticed Lena standing there, transfixed. Assalamu alaikum. He greeted her with a kind smile. Are you okay? Lena blinked. I heard this before, she whispered. Months ago, in space. The officer looked at her with surprise and curiosity. You heard the Adhan in space? I didn't know what it was back then, she said, still lost in thought. But hearing it again now, it feels like it's calling me. The man introduced himself as Ahmad, a local police officer and a devout Muslim. Lena shared her story. The mission, the accident, the mysterious voice. Ahmad listened intently, never interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. The voice you heard, it was no coincidence. The Adhan is more than just a call to prayer. It's a reminder for all souls, sometimes even for those drifting alone in space. Something awakened in Lena that day. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. She wanted to learn more. Thus began a new mission, not in space but within her soul. Lena didn't know exactly what drew her back to the mosque the next morning. Maybe it was the peace the Adhan gave her. Maybe it was Ahmed's gentle voice and calm demeanor. Or maybe it was the feeling that something inside her was finally waking up. After years of drifting, she arrived just before sunrise. The sky was still painted in soft shades of blue and gold. The mosque was quiet, peaceful, a place where the noise of the world seemed to fade. Ahmad greeted her with the same warm smile. You came back, he said softly. I couldn't stay away, she replied, almost whispering. There's something about this place. It calms me. Ahmad led her into the mosque courtyard. They sat under a tree where the morning breeze rustled the leaves. You said you heard the Adhan in space, he began. That's no coincidence. Ilyana. Sometimes Allah speaks to us in ways we don't immediately understand, she said. And I'm not even sure I believe in God, she admitted. I've always believed in science, in facts, in things I could measure. Islam doesn't ask you to abandon knowledge, Ahmad replied. It asks you to see in knowledge a path to understanding the Creator. Every star, every planet, every atom, they all point to something greater, to what science alone cannot explain. Lena looked at him with surprise. You believe that science and religion can coexist? I believe they must, he answered. Allah calls us to seek knowledge. The Quran speaks of the heavens and the earth, of the creation of man, of the cycle of life and death. Islam is not afraid of science. It embraces it. That morning, Lena listened more than she spoke. Ahmed's words touched something deep inside her. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it, calmly, sincerely, with a confidence that made her feel safe. In the following weeks, Lena returned to the mosque almost every day. She and Ahmad would sit and talk for hours, not just about Islam, but about the universe, the soul, the meaning of life. She asked questions, hard questions, and he never rushed to answer. Sometimes he admitted he didn't know, but they would search for answers together. One day she said, I used to think space was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. But there's a kind of beauty here too, in prayer, in quiet reflection. It's different, but maybe more important. Ahmad smiled. Sometimes the greatest journey isn't across galaxies, but into your own heart. Lena was changing, and she knew it. There was a softness, a peace returning to her, something she'd never known before. But what she still struggled with were the steps. She wasn't sure she was ready to take them. "I'm thinking about it," she admitted one evening. "About becoming Muslim, about saying the Shahada. But I'm scared. What if I'm not ready? What if I make a mistake?" "No one is perfect," Ahmad replied. "Becoming Muslim doesn't mean you'll never stumble. It means you've chosen a path and are willing to walk it, no matter how hard it gets. The first step isn't knowing everything. It's trusting the one who does." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the echo of the Adhan in her ears. She remembered the cold silence of space, how a voice had comforted her when everything else had failed. And now, here on Earth, that same voice still guided her. The next morning, Lena asked to meet with the imam of the mosque. Ahmad, quietly joyful, led her to him. The imam, an elderly man with kind eyes and a deeply calming presence, welcomed her warmly. They spoke for a long time. Lena shared everything. Her journey into space, the voice she heard, her confusion, and her hope. The imam listened patiently, then said, "The voice you heard was not by chance. Allah calls each of us in different ways. For some it's joy, for others sorrow. For you, perhaps it was the silence of space. But you heard him and you responded. That is a gift." He explained the meaning of the Shahada, the testimony of faith. "When you say these words," he said gently, "you're not just declaring something with your tongue. You're opening your heart to a truth that's been waiting for you." Lena's eyes filled with tears. I think I'm ready." That day, as golden sunlight filled the mosque, Lena stood before the imam and Ahmad. Her heart was pounding, her hands trembling. In the background, the Adhan played softly, as if the universe itself had paused to listen. Lena took a deep breath. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." Her voice wavered slightly, but she didn't stop. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." At that moment, something inside her shifted. A weight lifted. A door opened. A peace she had never known before filled her entire being. She was no longer just Lena Armstrong, the astronaut. She was Lena, the believer, the seeker, the one who had come home without ever leaving Earth. Ahmad's eyes were full of tears. The imam smiled and raised his hands in prayer. And Lena stood there, a sense of clarity and purpose filling her for the first time in her life. Later that evening, she sat alone on the beach, watching the sky darken as stars began to appear one by one. She used to look at them through a visor locked inside a machine. Now she saw them with her heart. She whispered, "Thank you for finding me." And for the first time since returning from space, the silence no longer scared her. Felt like peace. Lena's life began to change, quietly but deeply. After accepting Islam, her days took on a new rhythm, centered around prayer, study, and conversations that stirred her soul. She spent more time in the mosque listening, asking. Every word from the Quran felt like it spoke directly to her. Every prayer was a moment of silence she had never known in the noise of her previous life. But what bloomed was not only spiritual peace, it was something deeper, something more human. Ahmad was always there, patient, sincere, never rushing her journey. They often spoke of everything: the sky, the sea, science, faith, their pasts and their dreams. And in those conversations, something unspoken began to grow, something quiet, a gentle companionship, an admiration, a connection neither of them expected. One evening, after a long walk on the beach, Lena looked at him and smiled. "You know, I never thought I'd find this kind of peace, or someone like you." Ahmad smirked, but there was something deeper in his eyes. "I think some journeys begin long before we take the first step." Their bond deepened naturally, like two stars slowly being pulled toward each other. They were different in many ways, different cultures, languages, pasts, but their hearts beat in unison. And somewhere along the way, that connection grew into love. One day, as they sat under a tree in the mosque courtyard, Ahmad softly said, "Lena, I've fallen in love with you more than I ever expected. But I don't want to rush you. I just wanted to say it openly." She looked at him, the Balinese sun dancing in her eyes. "I feel the same way, Ahmad." A warm silence fell between them. Finally, Lena whispered, "If this is where Allah is leading us, then I'm ready to walk that path." A few months later, in a small, quiet ceremony held at the same mosque where Lena had taken her shahada, they were married. There was no crowd, no grand decorations, just a few close friends, an imam, and the overwhelming feeling that something pure and blessed was beginning. Lena wore a simple white hijab. Her face glowed with calm and joy. Ahmad, dressed in traditional attire, couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, the imam quietly prayed, asking Allah to bless their union and guide their steps. After the ceremony, sitting on a woven mat under the stars, Ahmad turned to her and said, This is more than I ever dreamed of." Lena smiled. "I used to think I belonged to the stars, but now, I know I belong here." Their marriage wasn't just built on love, but on a shared purpose. Together, they wanted to do something meaningful. Lena left behind her space career not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She chose a new path, one that would bring her closer to people, to faith, and to the peace she had been searching for all her life. But the world didn't make it easy. Shortly after the wedding, Lena received a message from NASA. It was formal, cold, filled with veiled concern. "We have been following recent developments in your personal life," the message read. "While we respect your privacy, your decision to embrace Islam and follow certain religious customs has raised questions within the leadership. We would like to discuss your future with the agency." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She had expected something like this, but it still hurt. A video call was arranged with several high-ranking officials. They congratulated her on her recovery and then got to the point. "Lena," one director said, "we value everything you've contributed to the program. But your recent decisions, especially wearing the hijab and your public comments about your beliefs, may not align with the image NASA wishes to uphold." She stared at the screen, stunned. "Are you saying I can't believe in God and be?" "We're not saying that," the man replied unconvincingly. "We're just saying be cautious. Faith is personal. But your role here is public and complex." Lena didn't argue. She didn't shout. She simply thanked them for their time and ended the call. She sat in silence for a long time. Ahmad joined her, sensing her unease. "They want me to choose," she said softly, "between my faith and my career." "What will you do?" he asked gently. "I already chose," she replied. "That's what they don't understand." But the pain lingered. She had devoted her life to science, trained harder than most, risked everything to reach the stars. And now the world seemed to be slowly closing its doors on her. But Ahmad reminded her of something important. Maybe Allah is opening another door, one they can't see. Lena clung to those words. She began to wonder, what if she could build something new? A place where science and faith weren't enemies, but allies. A place where young minds could explore the universe without hiding their beliefs. It started with a conversation, then a plan, then a dream. Together, Lena and Ahmad began working on a project, an educational center in Bali, where science and Islamic values could be taught side by side. A school of thought that encouraged curiosity, awe, and balance. A place where the next generation could grow, with telescopes and prayer mats. It wasn't easy. Some didn't understand. Others criticized, but they kept going. Lena often remembered that moment in space, when everything went dark, and that voice reached her. That call not only saved her, it redefined her. Now, on Earth, she was answering it in her own way. And this journey was just beginning. Months later, the educational center took shape. At first, just a small initiative in a rented building. Then, a growing institution attracting curious minds from across the country. People were intrigued. Could science and Islam really walk hand in hand? Could reason and revelation coexist? Lena believed it with all her heart. She taught astronomy and physics, weaving in her knowledge of the stars with Quranic verses about the heavens. She showed her students that exploring the universe wasn't defiance against God, but a form of worship, that every planet, every particle, was a sign, a reminder of the vastness of Allah's creation. Ahmad focused on theology, spiritual development, and the beauty of Islamic ethics. Together, they designed a curriculum unlike anything else in Indonesia, one built on balance. Not everyone agreed with their approach. Some in the scientific community felt they were diluting science. Others in religious circles thought they were too open, too modern. But Lena had faced greater resistance than this. She had faced the silence of space. She had stared death in the face. She had walked away from the life she once thought she wanted. And through it all, she had found peace in something greater than herself. Still, one day, standing at the board describing the orbits of distant exoplanets, she paused mid-sentence. A wave of doubt swept over her. Was she doing enough? Was she truly bridging the gap, or just building another wall? That evening, she and Ahmad walked the beach again, the same beach where they once spoke of love, faith, and stars. Now she spoke of pressure. Sometimes it feels like people expect me to be the perfect example, she said. Like I always have to prove what we're doing matters. You don't owe them proof, Ahmad said gently. You've already shown the world something far more important, that peace and knowledge can live together. That faith isn't the opposite of science. It's the foundation of wonder. She nodded, but her thoughts lingered. Was she still true to her heart, or had the mission consumed her? Around that time, she received a letter. Not from NASA, not from critics, not from supporters, from her parents. They had watched from afar as their daughter, once the face of America's space program, quietly walked into a different life. A life they didn't understand. A faith they had only seen on the news. At first, they were silent, then skeptical. Now they wanted to talk. Lena was nervous. She and Ahmad flew to the United States together. Her parents' home was filled with old photos of her in an astronaut suit. Awards on the walls, framed articles in the hallway. Her mother's voice was quiet when they finally sat down. You've changed, she said. I've grown, Lena replied, calm but firm. I found what gives me peace. But you were already someone, her father said. You were an astronaut, Lena. You had everything. I had the world, she said softly. But I didn't have myself until I heard that call in space, until I understood who I really am. There was a long silence. Then her mother asked, Are you happy? Lena looked at Ahmad, then at her parents. Yes, deeply, even with the challenges, especially with the challenges. They didn't respond immediately, but when they hugged her goodbye at the airport, her mother whispered, We may not understand it yet, but we see it. It's real. Back in Bali, the institution kept growing. They were invited to conferences, consulted on curricula. Global news agencies wrote about them. But more importantly, they reached people, young and old, who never thought it was possible to love both science and faith. The road was not easy. They faced pushback from elite scientific institutions, warning of religious contamination. Lena received emails from colleagues, accusing her of abandoning rationality. And even for her, at times, the weight of it all felt too heavy. But every time she heard the Adhan, her heart remembered that night in space, that silence, that call, that peace. Years passed. Lena and Ahmad opened branches in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. They offered scholarships to underprivileged students. They held public events, prayer circles, science fairs. The center became more than a school. It became a refuge. One day, sitting under the same tree at the original Bali Center, watching students walk out after class, Lena turned to Ahmad and asked, "Have you ever thought about what we built?" Ahmad smiled. "Constantly. I used to think my mission was out there," she said, pointing to the sky. "Now I know it was always here." He took her hand. "And this is just the beginning." That night, as the stars stretched across the Balinese sky, Lena stepped out alone. She closed her eyes and listened. And in the silence, she heard it again. Not with her ears, but with her soul. The same voice, the same words. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Not a memory, not a dream, but a reminder that peace isn't a place in the universe. It's a place in the heart. And she had finally arrived.